Welcome to this explainer of the source material. Today, we're diving into what honestly seems like a total paradox. We're going to explore the hidden systems design behind one of the retail world's most fascinating formats, the Japanese drugstore. Let's figure out how this actually works behind the scenes.
So I want to start off with a really simple question. If you walk into a typical Japanese drugstore today, what do you think actually sells the most? You'd probably guess cold medicine, right? Or maybe cosmetics. I mean, it's literally in the name. But the real answer is actually completely unexpected.
As of 2025, food makes up roughly 1/3 of total Japanese drugstore sales. Yeah, groceries. Now, think about this from a business perspective for a second. Groceries usually carry a much lower gross margin than your over-the-counter medicines, cosmetics, or personal care products. Plus, they create a massive amount of extra work. You've got shelf replenishment, temperature control, checking expiration dates, storage, waste management. It's a lot. It is literally heavy, expiring food. Now compare that to a tiny, high-margin, shelf-stable bottle of face serum. Why on earth would a pharmacy purposefully take on the burden of selling things like milk and fermented soybeans? Well, that's exactly the mystery we're solving today. We're going to look at the drugstore paradox, how traffic drivers and profit generators work together, how chains use subtraction and scale, what happens with beauty products in dense urban areas, how these stores survive in shrinking rural markets, and finally, how we can apply this exact same formula to fashion retail. All right, let's dive into our first topic, traffic drivers versus profit generators, and the core formula of basket economics. Let's see how all of this builds into a formula that makes selling low-margin groceries in a pharmacy an absolute masterstroke. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the difference between these two specific categories. Think about it. People don't buy cold medicine every day. You probably only replace your shampoo when it completely runs out. If a store only sold those items, you might visit, maybe 3 times a year? But bread, eggs, milk, and natto, fermented soybeans, you buy those all the time. These are your traffic driving products. They give you, the shopper, a reason to visit frequently. The goal for the store isn't to make a massive profit on that natto. The goal is that once you're inside grabbing your soybeans, you also grab a high-margin bottle of medicine or moisturizer. Those are the profit-generating products. You see, the retailer isn't just looking at the margin of a single item. They are managing profitability across your entire shopping basket and your lifetime value to the store. If cheap eggs get you to walk through their doors twice a week instead of once, your overall value to them just skyrockets. Now, interestingly, not every chain applies this formula in exactly the same way. The strategy has to adapt to the environment. For example, the food-led model, used by chains like Cosmos or Genki, relies heavily on low-priced groceries to drive routine visits, which works beautifully in suburbs where you have massive parking lots. Then you've got the beauty-led model. Chains like Matsukiyo Kokokara focus on high-margin cosmetics and medicines, which is perfect for dense urban areas. And finally, there's the pharmacy-led model, like Sugi Pharmacy, where prescription services are what build that long-term trust and repeat traffic. Moving on to subtraction, addition, and scale, and looking at case studies in divergent strategies. Let's dig a little deeper into how these companies actually engineer their operations to protect their profits. Because driving traffic with cheap food is great, but if your operating costs eat up your margins, you go out of business. And that brings us to Cosmos Pharmaceutical. They operate on an everyday low-price model. But they do something really brilliant, marketing by subtraction. They realize that running traditional promotions actually creates a ton of extra work. You're printing circulars, constantly changing price tags, frantically restocking featured items. It's exhausting. So Cosmos simply removed those promotions to cut costs. They also limit their assortment of fresh meat, fish, and produce. Instead, they stick to highly predictable items like milk and tofu. That helps them avoid food waste and all that extra labor. So they aren't strong because they try to do everything. They're strong because they clearly decide what not to do, and then they return those savings to the customer in the form of consistently low shelf prices. And to protect those margins even further, these food-led chains use what's called a regional cluster strategy. Remember, food is heavy and it's expensive to move around. If you just scatter your stores randomly across the whole country, your logistics costs will absolutely destroy your profits. Instead, chains like Cosmos build extreme density in very specific regions, like Koshu. Doing this creates much shorter delivery routes, allows for hyper-efficient local advertising, and makes it incredibly easy to move inventory and staff between stores. Essentially, you win a region first, not just a single location. Next up, beauty, margins, and urban density. Focusing on the Matsukiyo Kokokara approach. Let's see what happens when you take this whole drugstore formula right into the heart of a massive, expensive city. So in super expensive districts like Shibuya or Ginza, the food-led model completely breaks down. Why? Because sky-high rent combined with really limited selling space means that bulky, low-margin groceries suddenly become a huge liability. You literally cannot justify using precious floor space for a massive aisle of toilet paper or frozen foods. Instead, these urban drugstores have to pivot. They focus on compact, higher-value, higher-margin items, specifically cosmetics and medicines. And this is exactly where the beauty-led model really flexes its muscles. Remember that core formula we talked about earlier? Well, in a food-led store, the traffic driver and the profit generator are two completely different items. But in a beauty-led store, they can actually be the exact same product. Matsukiyo Kokakara actually owns a beauty review platform called Lips. They mine those customer reviews and all that data to identify unmet needs, and then they engineer completely exclusive, private label cosmetics. Think about it. A private label isn't just some cheap generic alternative anymore. It's a unique product that you literally cannot get anywhere else, so it drives the store visit and generates that high margin all at the same time. All right, on to surviving shrinking rural markets and doing more with less. Let's take this whole systems design mindset to the absolute opposite extreme. How does this formula survive in a market facing severe population decline? 2,000. That's the entire population of Ikeda, which is a small, mountainous town in Fukui Prefecture. Now, conventional retail logic will tell you that a market of just 2,000 people is simply too small to support a large retail store. But drugstore chains like Genki and Yakuodo operate profitably in these exact environments. How? Well, if local competitors close down and the residents don't want to drive all the way to a distant town, all of that local demand concentrates into a single store. So even with a tiny population, if you can increase how often they visit and raise the average transaction value by getting them to buy across multiple categories like food, medicine, and household goods, the revenue potential actually works. But here's the catch. It only works if your costs are rock bottom. Genki actually calls their survival strategy low oxygen management. I honestly love this metaphor. It's kind of like an athlete who trains to perform at a high altitude where oxygen is really scarce. Genki builds this hyper-standardized, incredibly low-cost structure that's specifically designed to survive on very limited customer demand. Every single store size, shelf position, and operating procedure is totally identical. By not reinventing the wheel with every new store they open, they drastically lower construction, training, and inventory costs. They basically turn themselves into an essential, highly durable piece of community infrastructure that can breathe perfectly fine in a low-oxygen market. Finally, let's look at applying the formula to fashion and the universal retail logic at play here. Let's zoom out a bit, because what's really fascinating is that this isn't just a quirk of Japanese drugstores. This is a universal retail paradigm. Now, does this logic look familiar? Because it's literally the exact same framework. Let me ask you, have you ever walked into an apparel store just to grab a basic, inexpensive t-shirt or maybe a pair of socks, and somehow you ended up walking out with a high-margin jacket or a dress? Well, if you have, you fell for the exact same natto and shampoo logic. In fashion, the accessible items, the socks, the tote bags, those are your traffic drivers. They get you through the door. The jacket is the profit generator that actually sustains the whole business. And here is the strategic flow of how that actually happens in apparel. Because just placing cheap socks at the front of the store isn't enough. Just like piling up cheap eggs isn't enough. There has to be a bridge. In fashion, that bridge is usually clever merchandising or a really well-trained sales associate. You pick up the accessible item, and the associate offers a styling suggestion, maybe pairing those basics with a jacket or a bag. Your basket value goes up, the store's gross profit goes up, and ultimately their operating profit increases. It's a perfectly designed system guiding you straight from the traffic driver right to the profitable value. Which brings us to a final thought for this explainer, and honestly, a bit of a field assignment for you. The next time you walk into your local store, whether that's a pharmacy, a supermarket, or even a clothing boutique, try to look past the price tag of a single item. Ask yourself, what did they place right at the entrance to bring me in? What's the traffic driver here? And then where are they actually earning their profit? Once you start spotting these hidden systems of basket economics, I guarantee you'll never look at a store the same way again. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning how the world around us is designed.
なぜ売れるなぜ選ばれるそこにはちゃんと理由があるプロダクトプライスプレイスプロモーション 4B 売れる理由をデザインしよう 届かない、安いだけでも続かない、どこで出会ってどう伝える、すべてつながり価値になる、プロダクト何を届ける、プライスいくらで届ける、プレイスどこで出会う、プロモーションどう伝える、一つじゃない全部が大事、揃えてブランドになる、同じ商品同じ価格同じ売り方じゃ埋もれてく、だから見つけよう自分だけのここだから買う、その理由選ばれる理由を作ろう、4P で未来を描こう、プロダクトプライスプレイスプロモーション、違いが価値変わってく、安いからじゃ